Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority today, October the 4th. Susan, roll call.
Sure. Sabalakaj Farah. Here. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Rick Klopp. Here. Howard Losrup.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein. Here. Darren McKinnon.
Present.
Al McWilliams. John Mowat.
Here.
Rishan Ryan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
John Split.
Here.
Phil Weiss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Joan?
Yes, before we go to audience participation, I would like to move to amend the agenda and move our executive committee item, which is E, up to the beginning, so right after audience participation.
Second. Support for that?
Second.
Get support. So moved. I think we should vote on that before I move that. Support?
All in favor? Yay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays?
Get you warmed up.
Okay. We're on to item number 2, audience participation. We'd like to remind everybody that we have 4 minutes for each speaker. First up is Jim Adams.
Good afternoon. I'm here. I'm talking about the parking structure guards that you're currently considering. My name is Jim Adams. I am chairman of the board for the Michigan chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. 5 years ago, I lost my 18-year-old son, Morgan, to suicide. He was in his 3rd month of college. So obviously this topic is very near and dear to me. Here in Michigan, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for those in the 15 to 34 age range. 2nd. Overall, it's the 10th leading cause of death, both in Michigan and in the United States. And for every 1 suicide, it's estimated there are 25 attempts. And this is a conservative number only because the many suicides attempts are not reported as attempts. Well, based on that number, that means about 1 million Americans each year are attempting suicide. Suicide is a complex health issue, and that's a key word. It's a health issue, but it is preventable. And just like many of you may have be susceptible to heart disease because it runs in your family, some people are at a greater risk for suicide for the same reasons. Once again, we look at it as a health issue. Our organization is doing a great deal of research with primarily trying to answer the question of why do people take their own lives? It's not because a parking structure is lacking a barrier or firearms are more accessible. Those are the means. In fact, there is no one reason why people take their own lives. It's very, very complex that obviously 4 minutes I cannot go into. But to understand, you really need to understand the perspective of a suicidal person, that in their life they have reached a crisis point, that they are in unbearable pain, and their thinking and decision-making abilities are very, very diminished at that point. Well, we have learned that the most important thing you can put between a suicidal person and their way of ending their life is time. Time. By temporarily reducing a suicidal person's access to the lethal mean, in this case an open parking structure, we give the individual time. Time for the intense suicide risk to diminish, time for someone to intervene with mental health support. In most cases, when the suicidal person doesn't have access to the means that they had in their mind for ending their life, they won't substitute it for another method. The safer the environment, the better chance they will live. Our organization has been pushing for installing barriers on bridges to deter suicides. And in cities where this has happened, where we've actually gotten barriers installed on these bridges, the suicide rate has decreased for the entire region of those cities. So I think you're onto something equally important here. I mentioned earlier that suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for that age range, mostly college students. My younger son just transferred here. He's a junior. besides losing his brother, he's lost several friends to suicide. We need to create a culture that's smart about mental health and suicide prevention to save lives and improve the lives of so many other people. And we can take steps by doing it by having preventive measures in place, like these barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next up, do we have Andy Labar with us?
He may be running late.
Okay. Okay. We'll go to the third person up for the 4-minute talk is Peter Eckstein, or Eckstein? Am I saying that right?
I think I can be uncharacteristically brief. This is a picture I took a couple of weeks ago at the top of the Washington structure. And it shows two things. One is, and this is a rather short woman bending over. Sorry. This gives a better idea. It's about up to waist high on a reasonably tall young man. It's just a minor barrier to jump over. And if you do, you have Main Street below you, 8 or 9 stories now. These are pictures I prepared for City Council 2 weeks ago. This is a barrier that I found, somewhat by accident, on your Maynard Street structure. Part of the purpose was to, I think, avoid people throwing rocks on pedestrians below, but either way, it's something of a barrier, certainly to throwing rocks. The mesh might have been finer to prevent footholds, but it's at least a really good first step. And I guess I have kind of a pet peeve, which is this concept of best practices. We can go far and wide to find best practices. This is an urgent problem. I'm delighted at good practices, adequate practices. And I think that's the sense of the resolution that I've just seen that is before you. This may not be, what you're proposing is not necessarily the last word on the subject, but it's a very good first step. The City Council 2 weeks ago defined this as an urgent problem to be treated on an emergency basis. The analogy that I've used is that if you had a depressed child, youngster, adolescent in your home, you wouldn't leave a loaded gun on the kitchen table. Well, we have hundreds of depressed, maybe thousands of depressed people in the city of Ann Arbor, to one degree or another. And we have in some of these structures, in fact, a loaded gun. And I'm delighted that you are, I believe, in the resolution as I've seen it, prepared to take immediate action to see to it that that loaded gun gets taken off the table and gives some of our young people whom we will never know. No one will ever thank you because they will never, no one will ever say, oh, you saved my child's life, because they didn't know that child was going to do something like this. But it needs to be done, and I just want to speak in support of the resolution that's before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yep. Andy Labar, you're next, sir.
Good afternoon. I appreciate your flexibility. My name is Andy Labar. I'm here in my capacity as a member of the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, specifically as chair of the County Board of Commissioners. I came to this meeting from another meeting regarding the county's millage proposal, which is on the ballot this November. In a nutshell, we are trying to provide for Washtenaw County, a more universal solution paradigm, or at least resource paradigm, to address some of the challenges that you are all dealing with at a more specific level. And I would just say that it's a frustrating challenge, because so often those of us in local government, or those of us appointed to positions, are charged with looking at things from a perspective of budgeting and the needs of the group as a whole, rather than the interaction between government policy and individual human life. We have probably what is the most complex millage proposal in Washtenaw County history before voters, and it is probably the most needed. The only thing that is more complex than the millage language itself is the challenge it seeks to face. And so I hope, frankly, any efforts you can make to help mitigate some of the mental health problems that we see manifest themselves when we don't have adequate treatment or support on the front end, or frankly, when we don't have the adequate treatment or support on the back end. I think it's a worthy endeavor, and I hope you pursue it. I don't want to dominate your time here, and I'm a strict adherent to the 3-minute rule that Mr. Gunzel is well familiar with at the County Board of Commissioners in terms of public comment. All I would say is, as you address these issues as a DDA and as a community specific to Ann Arbor, please know we are trying to address them in a more holistic way as a county, because they need addressing. And at the end of the day, they involve not budgets and numbers and theories and concepts, but the lives of individual Washtenaw County residents and the lives of people who matter and who make this community great, and that we have some level of power to try and help, to try and improve, and to try and see that they are served well by their county government and those other units of government. So I thank you, frankly, for just having this on your agenda and having the willingness to take time and resources to dedicate towards it. Thank you.
3 minutes. Thank you. Our final speaker for the audience participation section of our meeting is Trish Cortez. Is Trish here?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Trish Cortez. I'm the Executive Director of Washington Community Mental Health. Commissioner Barr asked me to come today to talk a little bit about the mental health crisis that we're seeing in our community. Right now, we've been doing various educational sessions across the county talking about the mental health crisis that we're facing. We are seeing a drastic increase in suicides in our youths, as well as a demand for mental health services where the capacity is not matching that demand. So we are working diligently with all of our partners to try to come up with solutions. But we are definitely in a mental health crisis here in Washtenaw County, and not just here. This is something that we're seeing across the state. So that's to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We're going next to the executive committee. That would be section E, but moved up per Jones' motion from earlier, and I believe we have a resolution we'd like to talk about.
So, Joe, put it up ahead of the others or ahead of the other piece?
You know, maybe it makes more sense to have Ray go since with the participation, and then we'll do it.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
At last night's meeting, the CAC members and guests asked me to encourage the DDA's efforts to deal with the increased danger of suicides from the city's parking structures. We also, at the same time, they also asked me to once again communicate the CAC's strong support for the strategic selection of the Ann Ashley parking structure to add 375 spaces to the downtown parking supply. Last night, at the CAC meeting, it was all about future downtown strategies in relation to developments in areas outside downtown that will have a major future impact on the downtown area. Announcement of the selection of Fleur Park as the preferred location for a new train station, and related facilities was top on our list. It led to a long, heated, and unresolved discussion about whether or not this was the wisest decision. We followed that debate with a discussion of the proposed 620-unit Lower Town residential development at 1140 Broadway, as well as the Glen Hotel on Glen between East End and Catherine. Both proposals have now been approved by the Planning Commission after significant changes. This in spite of objections of some near downtown neighbors. City Council has already approved new zoning for 1140 Broadway. If they receive final approval by City Council, both the Broadway residential project and the Glen Hotel will play an important role in defining the future character of the near downtown area, the U of M hospitals, and also the campus, but also the downtown. It has been pointed out by planning staff that 1140 Broadway is in harmony with walkability and transit orientation, being located in close proximity to the major employment centers of the U of M health system and our city's central business district by walking or biking, whether the new railroad station is at Depot or Fuller. We continue to hope that in the process of developing routes and times for a new downtown circulator, that 1140 Broadway will be considered as a possible stop, along with other near downtown locations. It's a part of the strategy for the future. Last night, we didn't get to discuss much about the Allen Creek Greenway, which is also a part of that discussion in terms of near downtown, because it involves both. But the Allen Creek Greenway, now the tree line, as we know it, is most of all committed to attending, encouraging you to attend a public update meeting. That's tonight. Members of the Citizens Advisory Council said that they would attend that to listen and also to speak, and everybody's invited. Most of all, committed to a public update. This will probably be something that will probably go on for about an hour. So it runs from 6:30 to 8:30, and everyone's invited to attend and to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I don't think we have any more reports from city boards and commissions. Would we like to go to the executive committee at this point? Number 3. I'm sorry. Next is the presentation on the tree line, Allen Creek Urban Trail Master Plan. And pardon me, yes,
okay.
thank you. I have your name here somewhere, but not right in front of me. Could you tell us your name,
I
please?
will. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Connie Pulsifer.
Thank you.
I am the project manager for the city of the tree line, and my project manager counterpart from Smith Group JJR here is Oliver Kiley. And we understand you have a very full agenda today, so we're going to do our part to give a brief presentation of where we are with the tree line, and I've talked to DDA staff about providing some materials after the meeting, so if you're interested, you could do a deeper dive into this. Oops. Forward. How do I go forward? Okay, got it. All right.
Here so people can see.
So just a brief overview here. Many of you know of this project is previously referred to as the Allen Creek Greenway, an idea for an urban trail that's been discussed in the community for about 20 years. In 2016, City Council identified this as a priority project. It's been rebranded as the tree line, and the purpose of this priority project was to allocate funds to have city staff form a team to look at non-motorized connections within the community into the Huron River. What's different about this effort from past efforts is we had been charged with looking at the feasibility of this route and property access in particular and technical feasibility. So that's what we want to present to you today. So the project area, north is to the right on all the diagrams that you'll look at here. And the north boundary of our project area is Main Street at the Border to Border Trail. And the south boundary, letter number B up there, is at South State Street and Stimson. roughly follows the Allen Creek floodway along the Watco Ann Arbor rail line. So this project is all about connecting dots. As you can see, we have some very significant natural areas and green dots up there. Important neighborhoods close to downtown, the downtown core in Carytown, the South Ross Athletic University campus, and then the Lower Burns Park neighborhood. So the purpose of this is to make a non-motorized connection that will connect all these dots and bring visitors and residents into these important areas within our community. I'm not going to read all the key issues and considerations, but today Oliver and I are going to focus on this feasibility component of this and the property access component, and developing a structure and an approach for implementation. That will be our focus today. The project hits on 10 of the City of Ann Arbor's sustainability framework goals. And suffice to say, we're in task 4 now. We've talked to a lot of people through this process. We formed a technical advisory committee. Thank you to board member McKinnon for serving on the citizen advisory committee. We've talked to lots of property owners, the Watco Rail Company, MDOT, Road and Rail. We've had a lot of discussions through this process. We are at the point now where in November and December we'll be seeking approval from Planning Commission and City Council to incorporate this master plan as an element of the city's master plan. I'm going to invite Oliver up to talk about the framework itself.
Thanks, Kenny. And so there's a lot in this presentation, and I'm not going to go through all of it in detail. These materials I think will be available through this packet as well. This is basically the same presentation as will be presented tonight at the public meeting, and those materials are already available, I believe, on the project website. That said, just a couple of key things to set the stage from an overall standpoint. One of the key things that we heard in working with the community and working with our stakeholders is this the desire for an off-street trail for something that's not following along roadways to the extent possible. And really that was driven by a desire for safety, to have a separation from some of the major roadways in town. So you look at areas like North Main Street, Huron Street, South Main, down around Madison. These are all areas where there's a lot of desire for pedestrians and bicyclists to be crossing in or through those areas, but the facilities there are very lacking. Right-of-ways are very constrained, and there's only so much you can do within the street to reconfigure a lot of these roads. So that was one of the big drivers for this urban trail idea, trying to provide a continuous connection to get people from downtown, from adjacent neighborhoods to the border-to-border trail, to the riverfront, which is really growing in recent years as a hub of activity in town. So that's kind of the big picture of that. We get a lot of questions about, throughout the process, you know, this is at a master plan level, right? So we're still 30,000 feet in the air looking at this route, but questions like, you know, will it be paved? Yes, it'll be paved. There'll be pedestrian lighting, there'll be landscaping, there'll be stormwater improvements, those kinds of things will all be part of the eventual design for this as this moves into implementation. So those are a couple, these are kind of a range of the design assumptions that we'll be looking at throughout this process. Just a little bit on the design of the cross-section of the trail itself, so you're kind of aware of that as we move in and look at some of the routing. The basic idea is that the tree line would be a 30-foot wide corridor. That's the preferred width. In some cases it might be narrower. In some cases where we have more room or more land or property access to work with, it could be wider. But the idea is to provide adequate pavement width for pedestrian and bicycles to have separated movement within the corridor, so you're not trying to jam everybody onto an 8 or a 10-foot wide path, but you actually have sufficient room to accommodate a large volume of people. And that also then leaves room for landscaping, lighting, those other kinds of amenities that I mentioned. One question we get asked quite a bit is, many of the previous Allen Creek Greenway visions have looked at putting the trail within the railroad right-of-way. Even assuming that you could get access to the railroad right away with Watco, the owner of it, that does pose some significant challenges. Something to be aware of is that from the center line of the railroad tracks out to the edge, you need at least 9 feet of clearance just for the train cars, safe separation, all of that. Generally speaking, the railroad corridor through town is only 50 feet wide. In some cases it's less, in some cases it's wider. But that outside of that separation zone, that only leaves 16 feet on the side of outside of that clear zone that you have to have before you hit the edge of the rail property. That right there just doesn't give you enough room to have, 15 or 20 foot wide trail, let alone all the other kind of landscaping and amenity that you might want to be part of that. That's really shifted the focus of this effort to find that feasible route that utilizes other adjacent property while trying to minimize the amount of on-street traffic. That said, there are some sections that are proposed for being on-street, and the intent there is to create a separated bicycle facility to accommodate the bicycle traffic, widen sidewalks for accommodating more pedestrian traffic, and then upgrading those entire roadways with additional landscaping, street trees, stormwater management, all of those kinds of things. Generally speaking, the on-road sections would require removing parking from at least one side of the road. So that's obviously a consideration to be aware of. But the amenity impact of that can be significant. And then lastly, the third kind of cross-section that we looked at, we are proposing a number of bridges across the project. And so there will be elevated ramp sections to get people up to those bridges at a fairly gentle grade. So these aren't bridges where you're going up a set of stairs, crossing over and going immediately back down stairs. They're ramped, providing that continuous connection. So if you're biking or jogging or running, you're at an incline as you go up, but it's a much gentler grade. And then the intent is within that 30-foot corridor that you would always be able to provide a connection back to street level, back to the sidewalk to complement and provide a point of access onto those elevated or ramp sections. So I'm going to switch gears here and look a little bit at the route. This is just some nomenclature and language. Generally, the fatter lines that you see in the maps are what we're calling our primary route alignment. And there are some thinner lines that reference near-term opportunities where we might be able to improve streetscapes or improve connections while we wait for long-term, the primary connection to be built. And so Connie had mentioned the feasibility piece of this. This really was the first driver. So where do we have access to property? Where do we think we can get access? And from an engineering standpoint, is it feasible? You notice cost isn't an item up there, so that's obviously been a consideration. Just a quick note on the property piece. Every property owner that is affected by this route that's being shown, with the exception of a few that are noted on the plan, we've met with those property owners and said, are you comfortable having a line shown on your property in a city master plan for this trail? And in all cases, for everybody that we met with, they've said yes. In some cases, we heard no from property owners, and the plan was shifted to reflect that. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I mentioned continuity a number of times. User experience and safety is key, particularly getting across some of the busier intersections. Also, making sure this alignment is something that really does connect to the assets that we want. And that lastly, those opportunities to provide a unique experience. If this is something that's going to last and endure forever in the community once it's built. So we want to be cognizant of, what are those opportunities to make this something really special and a signature part of our community. So I'm going to go through these very, very quickly. Not even going to cover this slide. You can dive into more detail on these on your own. The long and the short of it is there's a ramp connection by the Argo Dam that would get you up over North Main Street and over the MDOT rail line. That's a major access issue right now today. The path would follow along Wilt Street, go through city-owned property at 721 North Main, go down to Felch Street, the development, Kingsley Condominiums. There is a 30-foot easement as part of that that's been secured. We would go through that property, short section on First, go through private property, ramp up and over Miller Street, put a tunnel underneath through the railroad berm onto the west side of the railroad tracks with a connection to West Park. And then we would ramp up and bridge over Huron Street, Washington Street, and come back to grade roughly where the railroad tracks come to grade at Liberty. And that point would be a key kind of signature gateway into downtown. So that's kind of the point if you're looking at trying to bring people from the river or to the river from downtown or into downtown. That Liberty Street gateway is kind of a key point to create a sense of arrival and connect people into the business districts, into the Main Street area, and so on. From there, the alignment goes south on First, switches onto private property. There's an on-street section along Ashley, and then it bridges and ramps up and over South Main Street in Madison, and then comes back to grade at Mosley, goes through private property, and then follows on street along Green. You can continue along Green with a connection to the U of M Stadium. Then you would go east on Hoover to State Street, and then south on State Street with an on-street section to our endpoint at Stimson. Just a quick note too, the council has passed a resolution to look at extending this as a future phase further south from Stimson to the city limits to the south, so something to keep in mind. Okay, very briefly, just a few images of some of these key gateway points. This is a shot looking at one proposed solution. This can be configured in a lot of different ways, but of a spiral ramp to connect over the MDOT rail and connect over North Main with a connection to Wilt Street. And then you see the border to border is in the more kind of brick colored down below with the existing rail bridge and Argo Dam kind of to the left. This was a connection going along Wilt, so this is at the top of Summit and Wilt Street with that gateway point, access point into 721 North Main going off to the left. The bridge over Huron Street, this is looking north now, and you can kind of see, I don't know if I have a laser bomb this work. This would be that tunnel underneath the railroad berm, and then the Miller Street Bridge in the distance, then a connection over to West Park this way. Then this is the bridge over Huron. This is that Liberty Street Gateway. Again, lots of, this isn't at a design level. It's just meant to be conceptual, illustrating the kinds of improvements to really make that sort of a signature entry point into the downtown area. And then, one potential option for a sequence of bridges or elevated sections over South Main Street in Madison. Again, there's an opportunity with these structures to be kind of signature arrival gateway elements. You think about them being positioned in relationship to the downtown as well. That sense of arrival and a gateway experience, that's something that these structures can help provide as well. Just a few, I only have a couple of minutes left. Just a few quick notes on the implementation side of things. The Treeline Conservancy is working with the city to put together a business plan that will begin to look at the governance structure for this greenway. We are anticipating that, like many other greenways that are built of this nature and scope, that there would be a nonprofit entity that would be the managing partner and the operator of the greenway, so it wouldn't be something that would fall onto the city's sole responsibility to manage. So this plan is looking at the governance structure. They're looking at the financial side of this, so that's both capital and operational. How do they generate and raise money for this? There may be some city resources, but there's a very strong emphasis being placed on grants, engaging the philanthropic community, corporate sponsorships, those kinds of things that are not typically done in Ann Arbor, but are very commonly done in other communities to finance these kinds of projects. So we'll be looking and working with the Treeline Conservancy to that end. Maintenance activities, we're going to skip that. And then the last piece is really kind of getting into the implementation strategy itself. The sense is that we would be starting to the right here on the northern section to start to make that bridge connection to the border-to-border trail as early as we can, and then working our way south towards that Liberty Street Gateway. So that north zone kind of grabs that whole chunk, connecting the riverfront into the close part of downtown. And just one quick note on this, we've broken that north zone into a number of project areas. Project Area B, this is in engineering phase right now with the city as part of their flood relief project to build a pedestrian tunnel through there. And then you may have seen the cost estimate floating around about $55 million. That's the construction cost, so an estimate of preliminary opinion of construction costs. So that includes all of those primary trail attributes and amenities and features, paving, landscaping, all that. That includes all the soft costs for design, contingency, engineering, all that stuff. It doesn't include some of these bigger unknowns though, like if there are property acquisition costs or environmental remediation work that needs to be done, it doesn't include those. In terms of thinking about other comparable projects though, our costs are relatively in line with those from a per square foot basis, kind of falls in the middle of the pack. Some of the other projects are more expensive, some are less, depending on how much elevated or on grade they are, whether they're on public property or private land. But we've been doing benchmarking throughout this process. And
then just to wrap this up, we do have a community-wide meeting tonight and are tentatively scheduled for the approval process timeline, November 8th, Planning Commission, December 18th, City Council. We are seeking, as we ramp up to the approval process, support from boards and commissions that we're working with, and so staff will be providing you a resolution that we would appreciate your consideration of support at one of your committee meetings. We've had 2 opportunities to meet with the Capital Improvement Committee. In anticipation of questions, but lack of time, we've put together a brochure that we want to hand out to you that addresses the most frequently asked questions about this project. And would welcome any other questions or comments at this time.
Questions or comments for Connie or Oliver from any of us? Great, it's great information, thank you. Like you said, this will be referred back to a committee and you'll be hearing from us.
Thank you for the
Thank you very much.
opportunity.
thank you.
Okay. Can we pick up on our amended agenda at this point and go to item number E, the executive committee? Everybody comfortable with that at this point? I believe that there's a resolution we'd like to put forward. Would like to move that?
Sure.
Joe?
I will move the resolution that I think we all have to approve funding for suicide deterrence efforts from the executive committee.
Support? John? Any discussion about this? Has anybody had a chance to read it? Any comments about it?
Could we have a brief description?
Yes.
Sure.
So many of you know that through the Operations Committee, the DDA put out to bid some fencing as part of our strategy to deter suicides from the garages. We had successfully implemented some signs going up. We've had a more active management of rooftops. The fencing project, though, was not successfully able to be delivered because we had relatively no responses. Actually, we had 1 response. The bidding climate was just too hot for many of the companies to respond. What we have in committee, and stressing right along, is the urgency to take action. 2 weeks ago, City Council approved a resolution that mirrored our sense of urgency, encouraging any effort we could do to put some fencing up on the rooftops. So we asked our engineers to recontact the sole bidder, seeing if while we are figuring out how to get a long-term fencing strategy in place up on the rooftops, we could go forward with some temporary fencing. And they were successful in contacting the sole bidder, who has given an estimate to the DDA of approximately $150,000 to get some temporary fencing up on the rooftops. The executive committee was asked to consider bringing to the board a resolution to enact swift action, and that's what they did at their meeting just about an hour ago. And so with that, we have a draft resolution. If it's useful, I can read it out loud so the public knows what it speaks to. And then we have our engineers from Carl Walker Inc. here if there are questions about the nature of the fencing. So here's the resolution that was just put together very quickly, just a few minutes ago. The resolution is entitled Resolution to Approve Funding for Suicide Deterrence Efforts. Whereas the DDA has managed public parking in pursuit of its mission since 1992. Whereas based on its engineer's estimate, the DDA set aside $400,000 in its fiscal year 18 budget for suicide deterrence efforts, including rooftop fencing on its parking garages. Whereas 15 contractors were solicited to bid on this rooftop fencing project, and only 1 bid was received from Future Fence Company in the amount of $1,386,446. Whereas on September 18th, 2017, Ann Arbor City Council unanimously approved resolution of support for Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority management and operational deterrent suicide attempt measures for city parking facilities, which council indicated its support for the DDA's ongoing efforts to deter jumping from the roof level of the garages and urged the DDA to place the highest priority on providing physical barriers on parking structures starting with the roof. Whereas the DDA shares the sense of urgency with City Council. Whereas the DDA's engineers contacted the Soul Better Future Fence Company to determine if they could provide temporary fencing until such time as permanent fencing could be installed. And Future Fence provided a bid of $148,840 to install temporary fencing atop the garages. Whereas the DDA Executive Committee recommends that the DDA approve $400,000 for a project budget for suicide deterrence at the structures. Whereas the Executive Committee also recommends that the DDA approve the bid from Future Fence Company to immediately install temporary fencing atop the garages. Whereas Republic Parking has been directed to assign additional staff to monitor the rooftops of the garages until such time as temporary fencing has been installed, and the cost of this extra staffing will be reported in the monthly parking and transportation report. Resolved, the Ann Arbor DDA approves a project budget of $400,000 to be used for suicide deterrence efforts in the parking structures, and approves the bid from Future Fence Company to immediately begin the process of fabricating and installing temporary fencing atop the garages. And resolved, the Ann Arbor DDA Executive Director and DDA Operations Committee co-chairs are authorized to sign contracts associated with this project. And as mentioned, we've asked our engineers to be here to answer questions you may have. We provided for you at your seat information provided to us from our engineers from Future Fence, and I'll leave it there.
Questions? Bree?
So I want to make sure that so the bid for the $148,000, roughly $149,000 to do the temporary fencing, that is not approving them for the full $1.3 million for the project. Is that true?
I'm going to ask our engineers to speak to that. This is Mike Ortley, Carl Walker Inc.
Hi. No, the $148,000 is for a temporary chain link fence, and it's temporary, but it's galvanized and it's supported on the walls, so it won't interfere, and it's a total 8 feet high. So that's on all 6 of the decks and for the whole perimeter.
And it doesn't guarantee the final.
No, it does not.
It's independent.
I spoke with them and asked that exact question. They said this number's good regardless of what happens next. And I think at this point they're anticipating that the next step is to bid out the final repair work.
Question, Mike, is it possible that what we put up now could be permanent? That we could say, well, it's not the very best thing we could possibly have, but this will do?
Yes, it's not going to be real attractive. It'll be galvanized. It'll be a little bit shiny, and it's going to be sticking up above the parking structures, pretty much straight. So yes, it could stay. The only reason that it would come down would be abuse and ultimately corrosion. At that point, you'd probably take it down. But so the answer is yes. The temporary part, I would say certainly a couple years. It's not a problem. 5 years, you might have a little bit of problem.
So is that the difference between the temporary and permanent? The permanent is how to create it to basically make it part of the structure.
Right. Yes. The permanent is really an architectural element, and it's galvanized steel, and it's powder coated for different colors of the different structures, and it's also similar height, but it's designed with a return at the top, similar to what you'll see at the Forest Avenue parking structure right now.
And intended to be far more durable.
So this implies that we will continue to look at a permanent solution?
Yeah.
And where do we see that in terms of timing and process?
So I understood from our operations committee, it is the intent of the DDA to install permanent fencing on the rooftops, and as a committee to look at some of the lower levels as well. They asked the engineers to tell us what the timing is like, because we had a challenge this last round that we're going to try to get more bids this second round.
Yeah, to to the point of trying to, well, to bringing the numbers down to be a little more reasonable for the final installation, we would relax somewhat the schedule, make the temporary barrier provide some time that it's not urgent to get the permanent fencing up. So the schedule was an issue. The size of the project was an issue for fabricators. Some of the fabricators couldn't bond it at the time because they were already bonded pretty high on their, or at the top of their bonding capacity at the time. So we're going to investigate breaking it up into smaller bids potentially, as well as looking at what the schedule, how it would help the final number.
So the temporary isn't less safe than the permanent?
Correct.
And again, to reaffirm, these are deterrents. This is not, there is no way that we are asserting permanent, temporary, that we are going to keep somebody in who has a wish to circumvent it. These are meant as deterrents, and as we heard earlier, that time, give someone time, we may be able to be successful in deterring people.
So I like this resolution on two fronts. One, it's immediate action. How soon can they have the temporary installed?
They are ready to be on site tomorrow morning, which means we'd have to close the roof on 4th and William tonight, at least portions of it. They said their production rate at this point, they're anticipating 50 feet a day. So it would take about 15 days to complete 4th and William. I've asked if they could add a second crew, and at this point they said they don't have a second crew to add, but I think as we move through, we'll see about them adding a second crew, which would be still during the normal time, so it wouldn't be an added cost, but it would speed things up. So 50 feet a day, it takes a while, like 15 days for 4th and William.
And how quickly are we going to have additional staffing on the roofs?
I don't mind, I'm going to ask Joe or Jada. Can I ask you to come to the podium? What we're speaking about is we've asked for public parking to increase the amount of staffing that we already have present.
So for public parking is working internally to get some postings up and work through their call list to get additional staff up. They did have additional staff in place last night. They're kind of reassigning people's duties so we get more coverage on the roof. And as we move forward within the next couple of days, we'll have a more permanent staffing, people slotted out for that job.
Jada, what is their motive if they see suspicious behavior or if they're worried about something or someone up there? Do they have a walkie-talkie? Do they have a cell phone? Does it go straight to the police department? What is that?
Yes, so all the Republic staff will be in marked vehicles. They would have their Republic parking vests on. They all carry radios that they're in constant communication with the command center and Ann Ashley. We're working with Republic Parking to develop a protocol, but we anticipate that that would look like them, just kind of monitoring people coming and going. If people seem to be lingering, they would then contact the command center and seek assistance that way.
Jada, have you talked to the Ann Arbor Police at all about their assistance?
Yes, yeah. I spoke with Lieutenant Renee Bush yesterday. She has said that she's asked for increased patrols in the structures. I made her aware that we would be doing more, management and patrolling on the rooftops, and that we would, of course, reach out to them needed. She said absolutely they're aware of that and they'll be willing to help us.
Any other questions? I think it's safe to say that there's support for this resolution, but should we make it official?
Yeah.
Who would like to support the resolution?
I think John did.
I think Joan and John.
Okay. So we'd like to vote. So all those in favor of the resolution to approve funding for suicide deterrence efforts, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you. Number 5 on our agenda is DDA members' communications. Would anyone like to speak?
I have something.
Okay, Joan?
Yes, to continuing the theme of safety of the parking structures, Jada has been working with the Ann Arbor Campus Community Coalition that's going to be posting in the parking garages this weekend. There's, I can pass this around, some posters about safety for the Michigan State game, about drunk driving. It's about being a positive fan, following the stadium guidelines. There'll be many people from out of town coming who don't know that you can't bring a purse or backpack or container into the stadium. So these are going to be posted in the parking garages. And as well, what we're doing, we've worked with Republic Parking. We're going to have a flat fee entrance on Saturday so that people can park there, and we're going to allow overnight parking. So someone who's going to the night game and may have overdone it during the game, they don't have to just get in their car right away and drive off. They can keep the car overnight and then pick up the car the next day. And since it's a Sunday, it's not really having any impact on our normal operations. So those are things that we're doing, the DDA is doing with Republic Parking, and to work with the city and the police to try to address some of the crowd control issues that are going to be going on this weekend.
Great.
What is that flat fee? $5.
Oh, wow.
It's a bargain. It's quite a bargain.
Stay away from that.
Great. Thank you, Joan. Number 6 is Executive Director of Communications, Susan.
I just have a couple things. One, I want to thank our intern, Lauren Groves, who has been diligently working on the annual State of the Downtown report. What you have in front of you is about 97.5% complete. And it's an astonishing collection of information about our incredible downtown. Everything you ever wanted to know, including, well, you name it, it's in there. And I just wanted to let you know any last changes, it's still possible. We're still waiting on a photo. For instance, we're highlighting downtown residents in this issue. And one of the residents we're highlighting is a former DDA board member, Gary Boren, so we're looking for his photo. Those kind of last details, and then we'll be out in the world. And we'll point to it on our website. You can share it with others. And then the other thing to let you know, another interesting parking garage study that we have underway. Increasingly, the effects of the outside world affect even Ann Arbor. And we are, as a community, celebrating quite a few festivals and events in our downtown streets. And one of the things that we now need to look at is during some of these events, if there is a need for some kind of temporary emergency sheltering, could the parking garages provide that temporary sheltering? It's not meant to be a station where people are going to have cots and sleep overnight. It's everything from the thunderstorm to anything else you might think of. The garages are being studied because, interestingly, they're designed for cars and not people, and people weigh more than cars. I'll repeat that. People weigh more than cars. And so when we all gather on a suspended slab, the weight of all of us on that slab has a different effect than what it was designed for, which was cars. So it's an interesting study, and it is just an example of kind of how the rest of the world affects even Ann Arbor. The 28 square miles surrounded by reality, this is an examination of how that might affect our little world. But it is a very interesting study, and we'll share that with the Ops Committee when we get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. I don't know. Number 7, we need to approve the September meeting minutes. Can I hear a motion? Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Darren. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions on the minutes? Pages 3 through 18. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So approved. Number 8, subcommittee reports. Finance Committee, Marie Clough.
So I would like to move a resolution to construct additional floors to the Ann Astley structure.
Second.
Thank you, Darren.
So we've been talking about this for several months. We talked about it at the last board meeting, and we tabled it because we wanted to have some additional conversation. I'd like to vote that we move forward at this point. Last week, the Finance Committee, we reviewed one of the issues that came up with different bond scenarios, committing the costs over a shorter amount of time, because there's always that possibility there will be no driving in 20 years. So we looked at that. We've heard a lot about that. So we're looked at different bond scenarios. We're still looking at that. I don't know that that decision is being made. So I think this resolution puts that to something that we will put more granularity to as we go forward. This is also co-sponsored by the Ops Committee. I don't know if you want to say, anybody wants to say anything. The gist of it is that we would like to add additional spaces to the system. The area of Ann and Ashley is in strategic alignment with the DDA streetscape investments. That space, it can be done relatively quickly and it's a less cost option than the other ones that have been looked at. So we'd like to consider, we have up to 3 floors that we can add. The structure was designed for that. So there'll be more discussion about that. So it's resolved that we'd like to establish an $18 million project budget for the construction of the additional floors. I won't read the whole thing, but that's the gist of it. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions, comments?
I'll just say, since as one of the people last board meeting that was an advocate of push or postponing to discuss more, I think finance talked through the bond situation, which I think that was one of the things that I was, iffy about, and then we talked about it at ops. So, all and all of us are here now, which is also great with a nice full board. So I think this is we're now settled the things that were the reasons for postponing it from the previous board items.
Keith, did you have a comment? I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to be voting to approve this. There's a little bit of reluctance in terms of we don't know what the future is going to hold in terms of parking, but especially given that we know that there are other parking surface lots that are going to be taken out of the system. This makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to preserve parking. It's also it's also in an area that certainly needs more parking. And Ashley is often full during the day, and it's the most cost-effective approach to doing it. It doesn't fit some of the recommendations we heard in the past about to add parking, to look at what the possible reuse scenarios are, and we know that the sort of ramped parking that it has doesn't address that. But given the fact that it is something that would be able to do relatively quickly and relatively inexpensively, it makes sense to go that direction instead. So I will be, maybe not with great fervor, but I will be supporting it.
Any other discussion, John?
Consistent with what I've described before, my firm, architectural firm, has been involved in looking at this project, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Additional discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor to approve the resolution to construct additional floors to the Ann Ashley parking structure, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. One abstention.
Keith, I barely hear your eye. That's how unfirm we're
Well done.
way to really sell it.
You're still on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see, what else? The other excitement at the Finance Committee was we went through all of our expense listings for the month, the financial statements. Like we do every month, we have several things that we go through. We reviewed the 10-year plan, updated with year-end figures for fiscal year 17. And the auditors will be joining us at the October Finance Committee. Our next committee meeting is Tuesday, October 24th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Marie. Next up is Operations Committee. John Split, Keith Orr.
First order of business I have is a resolution on page 24, which I would like to move. It's a resolution to purchase and install parking access and revenue control equipment at the 4th and William parking structure.
Second. Darren, support.
As you know, we had a new stair elevator tower installed at this parking structure. That project is now essentially complete except for some punch list items. As part of that, we also at the time proposed to change out some of the parking system equipment to modernize it, and we put out an RFP in July of this year and had 3 responses, and staff looked over those and decided that this was the package that they would like to go with. So any questions about that, Joe Morehouse is here to answer them.
And if you can space your questions out so he has to walk back to his seat, sit down, and then come back up again. That's the...
Sorry, Tom, he is jaded.
I don't think we've got any questions, so we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the resolution to purchase and install parking access and revenue control equipment for the 4th and William parking structure, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Resolution passes.
Next, I would like to move a resolution on page 27 of the packet, resolution to enter into a fiber and conduit use agreement with the City of Ann Arbor.
Support. John Moore, support.
I know that we have a full agreement in the board pack for those of you who want to read it. There's also a memo separately in the board pack about this. I will direct any questions directly again to Joe Lyons.
John?
Might be a pretty simple question. Has our DDA attorney reviewed the agreement?
Yes, he has.
That's it. Made it easy on you, Joe.
Darren?
I understand that there's, in addition to this $72,000, there would also be some one-time equipment that would need to be purchased for us to be able to utilize the bare strands that we'd be using or receiving, whatever the proper term is, from the city. And I also understand that at this point in time, the city and the Republic's IT group haven't gotten together to necessarily know what that order of magnitude is on costs.
Well, we do know how much the cost. We have not to exceed.
I'll rephrase it. What's the cost?
Not to exceed $10,000 per
Okay,
location.
10,000, okay.
They think it's more like 5, but just to be safe, not to exceed 10.
That's a one-time?
One time,
Per location.
per location.
Joe,
Yeah. You just have to put modules in your equipment to accommodate the new fiber.
is the $72,000 in the budget now?
Yes, we have it in our operating budget.
I was, the last line of this memo says that we're actually saving, once we get up and running, we're saving three grand a year, right?
For each location,
For each
beyond the
location.
2 that we're proposing,
Right.
as we connect other locations.
Right.
Since the $10,500 remains flat, no matter how many locations, we'll be able to relieve the old system that we're using now and save that much money.
The other fun thing about fiber is I believe there are a lot more guarantees on the uptime. I think it's like 99.9% uptime on fiber, which we utilize in fiber and I really enjoy. So I will be in support of this resolution.
Further questions?
Well, so the one, I'm reading the resolution as it is, and I had some time to talk to Joe and Tom the last couple of days. I would like to see the cost of the equipment included in the resolution. So if we know that information, maybe we can make an amendment to the resolution. I was going to propose to table it till next month. I understand there's not urgency with the timeline from a construction standpoint, so I would be comfortable either way if we could put money in there now that would also still be in the budget for whatever equipment's needed, so that we don't, if that's even necessary, I suppose. I I just want to make this a complete cost so we understand. We view the equipment as just another operating expense.
Okay.
We do in the IT of the system. We have a lot of equipment that has to go, and, you know, 10,000 didn't seem extraordinarily large.
Fine.
You're gonna,
Never mind then.
okay. All right, I think it's time to vote on the resolution to enter into a fiber and conduit use agreement with the city of Ann Arbor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes.
Last time,
Thanks, Joe.
I would like to move a resolution on page 51. The resolution is to approve a solar installation project on the 4th and Catherine lot.
Support. Keith?
Any questions that anyone has on this one? I believe Susan is going to answer.
So for this project, do we have a consultant that'll be spearheading getting it designed and including
Yeah.
a structural part of the canopy and all those sorts of things?
So
How does it get handled?
our consultant is Dave Conkle, who's been our ongoing consultant on solar. He's been the city's energy coordinator. He's now in private practice working on solar installations. He has been in contact with a few different solar companies who actually produce those car sheds. And so what the next step would be, the commission to get us some of the, what that would look like, we bring it to ops committee so we have a chance to take a look at it. Optimally, we'd like to locate these in the northwest corner of the lot. We have some electric charging vehicle units in there. At this point, it's not a goal of ours to actually take the energy from the sun and charge up the cars. Too many dark days, the inconsistency is not going to be there. So instead, what we're going to do, though, is begin to create the culture of associating people with those two things. This is meant to be a pilot project. The ultimate goal is to see if we can get them up on top of the rooftops of the garages, now that we put the fencing. But the ultimate goal is to see if we can do much more substantial installations. But there's something to be learned, both working with DTE, understanding also how to install them, just understanding more about what this nature looks like. So it's going to be a learning laboratory for us. The hope is we'll have 4 spots for solar, 4 sets of solar panels, and we'll be reporting out as part of the monthly packet both the progress of the installation and the options, but then also what we're learning. Because again, after a few months, it might be something we bring back to look at some larger installations on the garages.
So they're specifically going to be linked to charging stations?
Not directly linked,
Oh,
but
just in the-
more
okay.
symbolically
Okay.
linked. So we'll be generating electricity, which will sell to DTE. It's a symbolic thing. They in turn will sell us electricity.
Got it, okay.
Eventually, we're going to get there.
Okay,
This
got
has
it.
not got enough money for batteries and all of that, so
Got it.
we're going to take it simple.
We're still in Michigan, so we
Still in
can't charge the
Michigan, a lot
cars.
of overcast days.
We're not investing in a Tesla power wall.
We want, I mean, the goal of this, I'm sure all of you saw this lately, a lot of the auto companies are working toward getting away from gasoline fueled vehicles. And what we're hoping to get to eventually is a lot of substantial solar generation for the electric vehicles of the future. But we're taking baby steps because there's still a lot of gap between the generation of it and then the fueling of the vehicle. But it's a way for us to learn, and eventually I think it'll become more simple to actually generate the electricity that then the cars use to generate their energy.
So, I don't recall seeing this come as a budget. Where is this coming out of the budget?
This is coming out of our parking maintenance fund.
Okay.
And yes, I've got it. We ran it by, there are dollars in there that are sufficient for this and the other commitments we've made.
Is that okay with the finance committee?
I think so.
I guess as a point of order, you know, we talked about this, like.
We keep
this
talking
we
about
keep
this.
talking about it. I mean, it is $50,000, but it's still $50,000. I think it's, you know, point of order was is that money expenditures get approved by the finance committee. I actually forgot to chime in about the last resolution we approved, but let's just assume that they were. But since Marie brought this one up, I think I won't like vote against against it at all, but I think that would be good protocol to
Culture.
yeah.
Yeah, we can tell, there's no urgency if you'd like to table it.
Got it.
I'm sorry, Phil.
John?
I think I suggested last time, could we make sure that it's on the next finance committee agenda to, if we want to put this into policy, to come up with something and bring it to the board in terms of making sure that anything that we spend, I don't know how deeply, detailed you want to get about this. But,
No, I mean,
but let's.
Obviously, we had an emergency situation
Yeah.
come up, and I think
Let's just get it on the agenda and.
Yeah. If it's not urgent, why not start today? Why not start?
Also, the point is not to nickel and dime everything that's ever spent. The point is just to make sure that we're always being fiscally responsible. So if the policy is anything over a certain amount of money has to come to the finance, then let's decide what that is.
Yeah.
So.
Especially in situations where it's non-urgent and timing, it's not a timing thing, and there were some conversations about, well, you have to, well, how's the timing work out? But this is the case, it's even easier.
Yeah, and again, to that point, if you'd like to postpone and go through that, again, there isn't any urgency about it.
So we're going to postpone this resolution. Vote on
I'd
that?
like to make a motion to postpone this resolution so that it can go to finance. They can accurately vet it and then bring it back to the board. By funding source. You got that?
Okay.
Support? Does anyone support me in this solution? Fine. Support. Thank you.
Okay.
Conversation on that?
Any conversation on that, please? Keith?
So tell me again, the funding at this point was planned to come from where?
So we have funds available within the DDA parking maintenance budget that are at this point unspecified. They would then be specified, this specific amount would be specified out of it. And then henceforth at the Finance Committee, when you look at your encumbrance report, you begin to see how it's shown and then what's available left in the maintenance fund. That makes sense. So
Right.
you have dollars available, you just haven't designated them yet.
Because one of my views about this is finance is supposed to vet the financial viability of something, and if there's already something in the budget that's unspecified, it's up to the board to decide how to specify it. So I don't see the need for bringing it to finance personally. So I'll be voting against it.
Any other discussion on that?
So I.
Fervently or not?
Pretty strong.
Right?
Well, I think the issue was perhaps some expenditure should go through finance, and finance ought to make a recommendation to the board about what needs to go through finance in terms of amounts. I mean, we spend a lot of money, and I don't think every expenditure is going to go through finance.
John, I think that clarifies what you were saying, correct?
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to support. I'm not going to support this because I think that we can establish something clearer in the future. But I'm just fine with doing this right now.
As a policy, as
today.
a
Yes.
policy.
Yes.
I guess my point on that would be, we're talking about resolutions, and we don't have 6 of them. Sometimes we have more than others, but we have like 3 to 5 resolutions on our docket once a month. I think if something's coming to resolution status, then really the dollar amount is immaterial. It's like a resolution. We are very deliberate about our whereases and what we're putting in it. We're putting our name and our stamping on it. And at that juncture, it doesn't matter whether it's $50, $50,000, or $5 million. I think it's prudent for a committee that is tasked with monitoring finances to say, yeah, this is good. Even if we have allocated budget, general budget to it, to say like, okay, now we realize this, but did you know that we're spending money, we expect this to come in, someone should mention that. I mean, that's my thought on it. I'm not saying that like we should nitpick every little thing, but I'm just talking about straight up resolutions. That's kind of where I see that.
John?
Okay. We have a motion to postpone. Is that what we have?
Yeah, that's currently what's on the table.
So let's stick to the postponement.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would say this, I would vote in favor of moving forward to this, but I do think that at the next finance committee, we need to put some structure around it. So I don't really have an issue with this. I just have an issue agenda that we should understand what our policy is.
Okay, so what we have on the table is a motion to postpone the resolution to approve the solar installation project on the 4th and Catherine lot.
to one month?
For 1 month.
For 1 month and bring it to the November meeting.
All those in favor say aye. Howard, Rishi. All those opposed, say nay.
No. Motion fails.
Even my support man voted nay.
I qualified.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate you.
So now we have to vote on the actual resolution, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on the resolution to approve the solar installation project on the 4th and Catherine lot? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Resolution passes.
I mean, I guess I could stick it to principle, but I'm if I lose my support man.
Just as an add to that, anytime you approve a capital improvement, there's a life cycle cost from it. So even though this is probably trivial, there's going to be an annual operating cost, only because we have to buy electricity at a higher rate than we sell it for. And while this is probably immaterial, it is good fiscal responsibility to talk not only capital costs, but long-term O&M and replacement value. So in the future, I would agree with supporting that.
We have our first agenda item for the Finance Committee this morning.
But I am excited about that.
In your packet, on pages 52 to 54, monthly parking transportation report. Are there any questions about that?
I have a question for Joe. I was very glad to see that there is a meeting regarding setting up a condo association for Thurston, Washington.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that was on September 29th? Did that happen?
Didn't happen on September 29th, it happened this morning.
Oh, okay. So are we making progress?
Yes, we've listed out the common items that we have to come up with a budget for. We're still working with the assistant city attorney to set up a condominium association, which is about complete, and set up a bank account for the condominium association to pay those common expenses from that.
Were you able to set up any kind of a timeline to get it
I think by November 1st, we'll have another meeting and hopefully finalize this. But the official owner is the city, and they're going to have to pass how much voting rights they want the DDA representatives to have, or they're going to have to send city representatives every time.
Good. Well, at some progress. Again, I'd like to see it happen on the other structure too. Is keep pushing.
The other structure that we have it's just a matter of meeting now that there's been a transfer of ownership, and we have been in discussions with them about what we have, and we have been trying to set up a meeting or two.
Good.
Again, it's a three-way coordination with the DDA, city attorney's office, and the co-owner of the condominium.
As I've said before, I just see it as a big liability issue that's been sitting out there if something were to happen. So thanks for keeping pushing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll wait till he sits down and ask if there's any other questions for Joe. General operations, and we've alluded to both of these topics earlier in the meeting. Joe informed the committee that the owner of the 5th and Huron and the 1st and Huron parking lots has notified the DDA that these parking leases will not be renewed, and they expire at the end of November. Staff is going to begin to make preparations to end parking operations with these lots, and that will take about 200 plus spaces out of the public parking system. And the annual MSU U of M football game, again, will be a busy night, and the $5 entry fee is the direction that we're going to go to try to eliminate some of the hassle of coming out of the parking structure after the game.
And
next meeting, you
I
have
just
something, don't you?
have two things,
Okay.
and both very quick. One, just the status on the circulator feasibility study, which is nearly complete. We just have to meet again before the next committee meeting so that we can present the final report there and explore what our next steps will be and bring that to the meeting next month. And the other is just an announcement about we've invited Dr. Robert Hampshire to share details of his research with interested members of the DDA over the lunch hour Friday, October 27th. We have that date right now, right? Okay. From 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. He's done a lot of work about parking behavior and has done a lot of research which helps to assess why some streets are safer for pedestrians. And of course, that's of great interest to this body. We've asked him to come speak to us, so anyone who would like to join us on that Friday, October 27th, should be an interesting discussion. The next Ops Committee meeting is Wednesday, October 25th at 11 a.m.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, John. Next up, Capital Improvements Committee, John Moab.
Thanks, Bill. I'd like to move a resolution that you'll see on page 55. Resolution to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the city for the replacement of Carytown streetlights.
Support. Keith, support?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory, so maybe we can just leave it to if you have questions. We can ask.
Questions for John on the resolution?
Yeah.
This is separate than the whole capital improvement, the greater scope of the fifth and correct, right? Yeah. So this is outside of that.
It's a supplement.
Supplement. Okay, got it.
And it comes where out of the budget?
Yeah, and was. I just didn't want to be the. I didn't want to be the person. I didn't want to be the person. I didn't want to be the guy.
There are dollars available in the sidewalk maintenance budget.
And which sidewalk is not kidding? No. Okay.
And
I won't stand on my pedestal on this.
there are no operating costs for us down the road
No.
associated with this.
These are cities with lights.
Further discussion on the resolution? Let's put this to a vote. The resolution is to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the City of Ann Arbor for the replacement of Carytown streetlights. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution passes.
All right. Huron Street. We at our last meeting, we learned lots about traffic control. Traffic engineer came and gave us a good description of what's happening on Huron Street. There were good questions asked, some things we're going to go back and analyze a little bit more that has to do with sequencing lights and all those kinds of good things, and speed control of speeds and so forth. Their consultant team and Amber are continuing to meet with stakeholders along Huron Street. Again, as you know, folks who may be interested, have them contact Amber. South University is complete other than a few things. There's some light globes to be replaced, I believe, and some landscaping that did not meet spec that will get replaced. So if you're walking along there and you see things that look a little squirrely, they'll be improved. Yeah.
Yeah, just a maybe question for Amber, or anybody that pursues it, or anyone that we know. Now that our part of Southview is done, even though the first block, the Eastview block, is still closed, and obviously that's not because of us, but of course nobody understands or know, like they don't know, and nor do they care. So what, just for just general knowledge, do we know anything about the timeline of their project? And
I do not.
Liz, do you know?
I'm not sure when they're open.
It would
we
be
can
good
reach
to
out.
get like just to
reach
keep
out.
our communication up on our side. Sorry.
Yeah, we can reach out to city staff and then send out another communication. I
Yeah.
know that Liz did a few weeks ago, but we can continue to do that.
It doesn't have to be as regular, and obviously now it's not even in our scope, but I just think if you put this in the world of like good customer service, you know, like I said, most people probably have no clue, and they just assume that this is just leftover work, that's us. So we might as well explain it over and over and over again and keep people in the loop if we can.
We also talked about reaching out to the property owner and having them put up up some kind of coming soon sign so that people understood what was going on there. So
Yeah.
we'll continue to have those discussions with the property owner.
Okay, great.
Phil, we have all these wonderful signs for DDA projects. Maybe we should have a sign budget to say this is not a DDA project.
Whatever you do, don't take it to finance.
Cardboard and benchmark.
All right, and the last one, First Ashley and William, as you probably know, we issued a request for qualifications in July, and so we anticipate at the November meeting being able to bring resolutions forward to get those projects off and moving. You guys can fight over who gets to see the resolution first. And that's all I've got. Our next meeting is October 18th, 11 o'clock.
Thanks, John. Partnerships Committee, Joan?
We met, and this time we met with our partners. The next meeting is going to be what we call our internal partnership meeting, where we just have a talk with basically as a DDA committee. But we met with our partners, Washtenaw County Administrator Greg Dill was there, which was great to have him. We talked a lot about parking needs, and I actually think the county has come a long way in looking at promoting transit and other forms of needs for, or facilities for its the people who work there, not just looking at, we just need more and more and more and more parking spaces. So we talked a lot about that. It was very cooperative. We heard from the Planning Commission about this project that Ray Detter also spoke about at Lower Town. And we as a DDA presented our State of the Downtown report for some feedback for partners, and we did get some. And then we heard from City Council about various things the city is doing, no real action items there. So as I said, next time will be our more internal DDA Partnerships Committee, and that is October the 11th at 9 a.m. So everybody is welcome.
Thanks, Joan. We already did executive committee. So number 9 is new business. Does anybody have any new business? Or Marie?
I have one thing I want to say. So I was looking at, I wonder if it would make life better when I look at the way the committees go in the month. So it's partnerships, capital improvements, finance, ops. I wonder if finance shouldn't be the last one of the month. And so part of the finance committee meeting would be, here are the resolutions that are coming forward in the dollars so that we can go through it, so I can see, oh, here's all the stuff that's going to come, and we can talk from a budget standpoint, and then we don't have to do this, right? So if we were last up, it could come to the finance committee. What do you think of that?
Marie, I like your can-do attitude.
Okay.
Joe, how do you feel about that?
Well, we could talk about that, but
Fine.
that way, I would say, oh, I already know. It came up, we talked about it. If there was any additional costs that we needed to come into consideration, we could have the discussion before we got here, and then.
Fridays at 4:30 work for you?
No. Anyways, let's talk about that at the next time.
Okay. Do we have any other audience participation this afternoon? Just a reminder, 4 minutes.
Jim Oveson. I was coming from a Watts meeting this morning, back to my car, and stumbled upon the DDA to find out what's going on. And one thing that came out of that meeting that I think is important for people that are in leadership positions at the city, there are a lot of things happening. As we all know, there's the tree line project and there's the train project, and so now it's going to be the time in the city when all kinds of amazing things are proposed. And when I think about transit, there's also the transit-oriented development conversation that's happening. When people talk about that, they oftentimes wonder, how come it's not in Ann Arbor, we don't do better? And part of the reason is because we have this structural municipal finance problem, and that's the real reason a lot of that happens. We have enough money to fake it, but we don't quite have enough money to do it really well all the time. When I think of transit, fares don't pay for transit. And I've heard people talk about, well, we're going to increase demand for transit and we'll have more transit, and that's not how it works. If you don't have the millage and you don't have the federal matching funds, you don't have buses. And so when the university has, the medical center has a lot of demand for transit, but it doesn't pay any of the millage. And so even though the university pays for the fares for university folks, it doesn't matter, because that's why the demand doesn't increase, and that's why there's standing room only on the number 4 coming from the east part of the county. And the reason you'll hear people talk about, well, the university is paying more than everyone else, and the reason is because when they figured out what the fares were going to be, the university doesn't have as many senior citizens in it, and so when they calculated what the fare was supposed to be, they had to extract the people that were getting the senior discount, and so it looks like the university is paying more, even though they kind of calculated how much people would be paying if they were riding the buses from the university, and that's why that's happening. And even when that happens, there's not the infrastructure. So when we talk about the density, I think it's important to remember those things, identify when those things are happening. And we do really need to, it's a big thing, but try to find ways to fix that, because it's going to become more and more of a problem as people are coming into the city and not understanding why. Oftentimes it seems like there should be able to be a downtown circulator, there should be able to be some of these sort of things. And it's not because of lack of vision, it's because the finances aren't working. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Any other audience participation this afternoon? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn. Support. All those in favor of adjournment? Say aye. Opposed?